There is a question that has been given to thousands of students at the most selective universities in the world, and most of them get it wrong. A bat and a ball cost £1.10 in total. The bat costs £1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? An answer has probably already arrived. 10 pence. It feels clean and obvious, and it is wrong. Because if the ball were 10 pence, the bat would be £1.10, and the total would be £1.20. The ball costs 5 pence. Frederick published that problem in 2005, and majorities at Harvard, Princeton, and MIT answered it incorrectly. Which tells you the thing this video is actually about. The signs that follow are not signs of a low IQ score. Every one of them shows up in people who score very well, and by the end you will know why that is the more useful finding. 1. The answer that arrives with no second thought. Frederick's test was not measuring how much you know. It was measuring whether a fast, intuitive answer gets audited before it leaves your mouth. Almost everybody generates the wrong answer first. The difference between people is what happens in the next half second. Some feel a small itch of doubt, run the sum backwards and catch it. Others feel nothing at all, because the answer felt right and feeling right was treated as sufficient. So watch for the person whose confidence has no lag in it. Every question gets an immediate reply. Nothing is ever checked. There is no visible moment of the answer being weighed before it is delivered. This is not slowness of mind. Plenty of very quick people run that check in a fraction of a second. It is the absence of the check entirely, and it is a habit rather than a capacity. 2. Understanding that vanishes the moment it is examined. In 2002, Leonid Rosenblatt and Frank Keel asked people to rate how well they understood a zipper. Most rated themselves highly. Then they were asked to explain step by step how a zipper actually works. The ratings collapsed. Not because anybody had lied, but because a feeling of understanding had been sitting where an explanation should have been, and nobody had checked the difference until that moment. They called it the illusion of explanatory depth, and it appears with toilets, locks, bicycles, and helicopters. The 2002 studies used small groups of Yale undergraduates, so hold the size of the effect loosely. The direction of it has replicated many times. Philip Fernbach and colleagues took this somewhere sharper in 2019. Among people opposed to genetically modified food, those most extreme in their opposition scored lowest on actual knowledge of genetics, while rating their own understanding highest. The sign is not ignorance. Everyone is ignorant about nearly everything. The sign is a strong opinion that has never once been asked to explain its own mechanism. 3. Arguments that only ever run in one direction. Ask someone to list the arguments on both sides of something they care about. Watch the two lists. Keith Stanovich and Richard West have studied this for decades, under the name my-side bias, the tendency to generate and evaluate evidence in a way that favors what you already think. And here's the finding that reframes this entire video. In their work, the size of a person's my-side bias shows very little relationship to their cognitive ability. It is not predicted by intelligence tests, and Stanovich has noted that it is not reliably predicted by open-minded thinking measures either. Read that again in practical terms. A person can be genuinely brilliant and still be completely unable to build a fair version of the argument against them. So the test is not whether someone is clever in a debate, it is whether they can state the opposing case in a form its holders would recognize. Someone who can only ever produce a weak cartoon of the other side is showing you something real, and it is something an IQ score would not have caught. 4. Certainty that grows as the ground gets thinner. You already know the name of this one, and the version you know is probably wrong. Kruger and Dunning reported in 1999 that low performers overestimate their ability. That got flattened online into stupid people think they are geniuses, which is not what the paper says and not what the evidence supports. In 2020, Gilles Gignac and Marcin Zajankowski argued that much of the classic effect is a statistical artifact produced by two ordinary things. Almost nobody rates themselves below average, and any imperfect correlation drags estimates toward the middle. Using intelligence data, they failed to find the effect with the tests they considered valid. Other researchers pushed back, including a 2023 comment arguing their result came from a data recoding choice. And the argument is still open, so treat the strong version as unproven. What survives is smaller and more useful. Miscalibration is real. It is common, and it is not a special property of stupid people, which turns the sign into something you can actually observe, not confidence. Confidence that does not move when the evidence does. Someone at the edge of their knowledge who sounds precisely as sure as they did in the middle of it. 5. Being moved by sentences that mean nothing. In 2015, Gordon Pennycook and colleagues built a set of statements using real, profound-sounding vocabulary arranged at random. Wholeness quiets infinite phenomena, grammatically fine, syntactically fine, meaning nothing, because nothing was ever put in. They asked people to rate how profound they found them. Some people rated them highly, and those ratings tracked other things. Higher receptivity went with weaker performance on analytic thinking tasks and with more willingness to believe claims on little evidence. The mechanism is worth naming carefully. It is not gullibility about facts. It is a failure to check whether a sentence has any content at all before responding to how the sentence feels. You will meet this daily. A statement that sounds deep, produces agreement in a room, and cannot be restated in plain words by anybody who just nodded at it. The person who quietly asks what that would look like in practice is running the check. Everybody else skipped it. 6. Claiming to know things that do not exist. This one has a test so clean it feels unfair. Give someone a list of terms in a field and ask which they are familiar with. Slip in some items that were invented for the study and refer to nothing. Stavatier, Emily Rosenzweig, and David Dunning ran a version of this in 2015 with personal finance. People who rated their own financial knowledge highest were the most likely to claim familiarity with terms like pre-rated stocks and fixed-rate deduction, which do not exist. What makes this useful is that it is not about being wrong. It is about what happens at the exact moment a gap appears. One response is to say, "I have not come across that." Another is to reach for recognition that was never there, because admitting the gap felt more expensive than filling it. The behavior is small, and it happens in a second. Watch how someone handles the arrival of a term they do not know. 7. Treating the words "I do not know" as a defeat. Every sign so far collapses into this one. The unchecked answer, the explanation that was never attempted, the one-sided argument, the immovable certainty. The profound-sounding nothing, the invented term claimed as familiar. All 6 are the same move performed in different rooms. Something arrived at the edge of what was known, and instead of the edge being acknowledged, it was papered over. Researchers studying intellectual humility describe roughly this, recognizing that your beliefs might be wrong and being willing to revise them when evidence says so. It is a disposition rather than a capacity, which is why it is trainable and why it is the whole point of this list. The people worth listening to are not the ones who are right most often. They are the ones who tell you where their knowledge stops. That sentence costs them nothing, and its absence is the loudest signal on this list. So here is the reframe. The title could not carry on its own. None of the 7 is a good measure of intelligence, and I have deliberately given you a list that intelligence tests would largely fail to catch. Stanovich's point stands over all of it. Rational thinking and raw cognitive ability are far more separable than most people assume, which is why brilliant people believe absurd things and why a modest thinker with the habit of checking will outperform a fast one without it. That has an uncomfortable half and a hopeful half. The uncomfortable half is that being clever protects you from almost none of this. The hopeful half is that habits can be changed, and IQ scores mostly cannot. One request before you go: do not use this as a scorecard for people you already dislike. Everything on this list is easier to spot in someone else than in yourself. And the person who watched this and felt uneasy about their own habits is, by definition, running the check that the list is about. That is the cue most people miss. Which of the 7 did you catch yourself doing? Leave it in the comments, subscribe to Psychology Q, and I will keep showing you the signals hiding in plain sight.